Thank you, John, for beautiful, beautiful music to begin today. And welcome all to the Unitarian Universalists of Transylvania County, where we have open arms and open hearts for all who come bringing goodwill. We begin today with our candles of joy and sorrow because we believe that in community and sharing those deep emotions that reside in our hearts, by unlocking those and sharing them in community, we can ease suffering and magnify joy. And we also welcome silent candles for those who are not ready to share in words. I see we already have some candles lit, and I have lit a couple of them. One of sorrow for a number of people who have passed in my other congregation down in Georgia that we recently moved from, and one of joy for seeing Sue and Jim here in our midst. Welcome, Sue Noble. And I'm speaking into the microphone just so everyone can hear Joys and Sorrows. There is a third candle here. If there's anyone here who would like to claim that and tell us what that's about, or if anyone has not had an opportunity to light a candle but would like to have one lit, please so indicate. Yes?
Vanessa, I don't remember what I originally lit it for, but now I'm lighting it for David Blackwell being on his feet.
Hooray, hooray. A candle for David Blackwell being on his feet. And anyone else have something they are bursting to share this morning? Yes? Thank you. Thank you for having friends here with us. And that's kind of what it's all about. Anyone else? We have a few announcements this morning. First of all, Lauren, our speaker today, is going to have a formal introduction later in the service by R.K. Young, but I want to say welcome. We are happy to have you here, Lauren. Also, I want to remind you that if you haven't already deduced by the lovely smells coming out of the fellowship hall, today is Super Sunday. It's the second Sunday of the month. And just try not to let your mouth water too much while you're waiting for that to take place after the service. You do not have to have brought a soup to partake of soup. So please stay with us and enjoy something to eat after the service. I'll remind you too, and probably will say again when the offertory comes up, that our special partner in giving today and this month is Vecinos. And I think we had a slide for that, yes. Vecinos works throughout Western North Carolina to help bring better living conditions to farm workers and others who are in need. And finally, we have some special music today. Please enter into the spirit of worship as our choral ensemble, not the full choir today, sings Dona Nobis Pacem.
Well, that turned it off all the way. This is the small group that we're forming from the choir, the choral ensemble. I'll just take it. Catherine. But we're going to sing Dona Nobis Pacem. You all know it, so you're going to get to sing it with us. We'll sing it through a couple of times, and then we're going to divide you up into three sections, and you'll sing it all together. Won't that be fun? All together in unison. 1, Now, doesn't that sound lovely? I don't know what we're going to do with all these people. There's some room back in the choir if anybody else comes in. Sing. Let's all stand up and sing Dona Nobis Pacem. The choir is going to come out and lead us all together. The ensemble, I should say, is going to come out. We're going to divide you into three sections. 1, 2, 3. Here we go all together. We talked about this before we started. This is number 1, but you're over there. Just imagine, every Wednesday afternoon I get to cope with this. It's going to be the note we start on. 1, 2, sing. Do, la, nobis pacem, pacem. Do, la, nobis pacem. Do, la, nobis pacem. Now, for those of you who don't know what you're saying, it means give us peace. Give us peace in the world, give us peace in our community, give us peace in ourselves. Here we go with the first group. 1, 2, sing. Dona nobis pacem, pacem. Dona nobis pacem. Ready, sing. Pacem, pacem. Dona nobis, ready to sing. Now sing. Dona nobis pacem.
I got discombobulated because it was so beautiful. Thank you all for singing with us. Dona nobis pacem. Give us peace. Makes me feel like I want to take a deep grounding breath all together. Thank you. We open today with words from J.E. Abernathy, Jr., The Quiet and the Calm. Let us seek the quiet and the calm. Let us set aside our loud calling and set aside our struggle. Speak softly. Let us listen to the melodies that recall other proportions. Our moments tarry not with us. Let us then seek the dimension that endures, beyond all nowness and here-ness, beyond all requirement and particularity. Let us speak softly that we may hear. Let us enter into the quiet. And we'll light the chalice with words from Dan Lambert, and this will be responsive. And we're recalling here that today is a Sabbath day, traditionally a day of rest, a day of quiet. Because we have to have a helper candle before we go forward. Because the daily pressure of life weighs heavy on our minds, on our bodies, and on our spirits, we need a time of Sabbath rest. Because the stresses of our culture often leave us feeling burdened and looking for hope, we need a time of Sabbath rest. Because rest, fun, leisure, and naps help us cope and feel refreshed. We need a time of Sabbath rest. Because we think more clearly, love more freely, and share more joyfully when we are rested. We need a time of Sabbath rest. Thank you. May it be so. And now, welcome our many young people today, and welcome Kevin Lausch, who will share words of wisdom for all ages, and most especially for the young people. Thanks, Kevin.
Good morning, everyone. So glad to see all of you and so many wonderful children here. This morning's story is about centering ourselves. Our theme for January is finding our center, finding what truly matters to us, and then lifting it up, cherishing it, loving it, and supporting it. And this morning's story is called The Fisherman and the Business Person. And you probably have heard some form of it before. And so in it, see if you can find what the center of the fisherman is, what's most important to him. Well, it was on a beach on the coast of Brazil, and a businesswoman was sitting there, and she was watching the fisherman bring his little boat in and pulled out a good little net of fish, not a whole lot, but he came carrying it up the beach. And she said, "Excuse me, you brought in some fish there. How long were you fishing?" He said, "Well, I just fish for a good part of the morning, then I bring it in." Then he says, "Okay, what do you do the rest of the day?" He says, "Well, I go home, me and my wife, we cook a big meal together, we all eat as a family. then we play with the kids, then we take a nap, and then in the evening I usually go and see some friends, and we play guitar and sing and dance and have a good time together. She said, okay, but if you fished longer during the day, basically the whole day, how much fish could you bring in? Well, I could bring in a lot of fish then. Great. Well, what you should do, fisherman, is you should fish the whole day, bring in a lot of fish. He said, okay, then what would I do with them all? Well, you would sell them all, you make some more money, and you keep doing this, bringing in more fish, selling them, bringing in more money to yourself, and you could buy a bigger boat. And then you could hire somebody to fish with you, and you could start fishing more and bringing in more fish. He said, okay, but then what? Well, you would be bringing in more money. You could hire a few boats. You basically start your own fleet, and you'd be hiring more money, more people, and then you could stay back and start planning for the fishing while everyone else fished for you. And then you'd sell more fish, bring in even more money. Okay, but then what? Well, then you would like to start your own corporation. And so then you could have a processing facility on land. You'd have your fleets bring all the fish in. They'd process the fish, start selling it. You could even buy some delivery trucks and start shipping it out to stores all around your country. And you'd be making more and more money. And he said, of course, what do I do then? Well, then you would need to hire a vice president, and on and on. And she really helped plan out this whole guy's life. And he said, basically, then you'd have all this money. You could retire a little bit early. And the fisherman asked, well, what would I do then? She said, well, then you could do the things you really love. And the fisherman thought about it and said, well, yeah, I guess I could cook with my family. I could play with my kids. I could sing and dance and play guitar with my friends. And the businesswoman said, exactly. But then what did the fisherman say? Any guesses? I'm already doing that. So before we get into this new year and are so busy being so productive, let's remember, what is our center? What are the things that we love? And let's remember to focus on those, and then there's room for everything else. And with that, will Emery come up with our chalice candle, and we'll light it, and we'll sing out all these great kids.
Donating your treasure, giving your financial support is just one way you help carry out the mission of UUTC. And of course, it's an important way. Part of our mission is to support individual spiritual journeys, and your financial donations keep this building open and staffed for things like spiritual explorers, choir practice, meditation classes, book clubs, and religious exploration for all ages, and much more. And so that's one part. And our special collection this month, again, it's for vecinos, and that supports the other half of our mission, which is to promote social, economic, and environmental justice. And Vecinos does that by working to ensure that farm workers and other needy people in Western North Carolina have the health care they need, and they also provide other human services. So we ask for your donations at this time. And know that all your donations lovingly given are received with joy. We are grateful.
The bulletin calls for us to sing a hymn now that's called Meditation on Breathing. It's a very introspective, very quiet song, but it's in 3 parts. I'm not going to send the choir out in disarray to lead you the way we did before. But I'm going to have the ensemble sing it for you once through. We'll put it together by parts, and then you'll join in on singing with the altos.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
When I breathe in peace. When I breathe out love. Those are your very simple words. We'll start it again, and when the altos come in, I'll point to you and you sing with the altos. Any basses who want to sing with this, you're welcome to. Or tenors.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace.
And most of you have seen the order of service online. They got mailed out yesterday because I was late and all that good stuff. But the previous on Friday, you saw a slight introduction to Lauren Agrella-Sevilla. Now, I got in contact with her last night and waited until the kids were around so they could help answer some of these questions that I'd asked. And you need to know ahead of time that Lauren has been here quite a while. She first joined UUTC in 2006, I believe it was, and she met her husband Matthew when they were both working at the Outdoor Academy, which is part of Eagle's Nest Camp. Now, nowadays, you could just as easily as Kay did on Saturday with youth basketball down there at the rec center, coaching the Suns' second to third grade team in basketball. So she has multiple skills. When she was first here, she was running the CRE, or created a program because it was so brand new. She created this program for children's religious exploration. And one of their favorite things to do was called Everybody's Birthday. And there'd be cake, there'd be ice cream, and I'm really thinking we need to repeat that program. She has aspirations for long-distance bike rides and hiking. Those are things that she does as often as possible. But her other great aspiration is in nurturing connection and peace in her community, which I think she does exceptionally well. Now, Asa and Elias chipped in. I asked what her favorite food was, and they said kale accompanied by wine. So I do hope that you will enjoy our wonderful speaker. We have a reading coming up here, and you do that, or she does that? She does that. Fabulous. Okay. Thank you, Lord.
Yeah, y'all are all welcome at our house anytime for kale and wine. I'm so glad to be with y'all this morning, and I'd like to open my thoughts today with a poem you probably have heard by Pablo Neruda, Keeping Quiet. Now we will count to 12, and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. It would be an exotic moment. Without rush, without engines, we would all be together in a sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would not look at his hurt hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victories with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade, doing nothing. What I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could do nothing, perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Now I'll count up to 12, and you keep quiet, and I will go. So that's basically my whole message today in Pablo Neruda's poem. And now I'm going to use an inordinate number of words to convey to you sort of my exploration of doing less and saying less as empowerment and as connection. So I'm always honored when there's space to share thoughts with y'all, and I love thinking of these messages as conversations. I've not figured any of this out. Those of you who know me might know that I tend to be in pretty constant motion. And so being still is a practice. Like it's a big practice. And so thank you in advance for hearing my thoughts. And I hope some gem of inspiration I'm calling forth lots of different folks that I've learned from in the Last year or so, folks have been reading, and I hope something lands with y'all today to be able to carry in your heart some inspiration for your own centering. So I'd love to begin this conversation today by acknowledging just the sense of heaviness that many of us may have coming into this new year. A lot has come to pass in our world that may have multiplied our sense of vulnerability, and perhaps for many of us, our sense of fear. The pandemic has shifted the ways we engage with one another, our sense of loneliness, our sense of lack of connection. Gun violence has escalated in this country in particular in unimaginably tragic ways. Violence against LGBTQ folks, people of color continues, wars on our planets, all over the place, people enduring all kinds of hurt and pain. Our national mental health crisis is at an all-time crescendo. Women's freedom to make decisions about our own bodies has been denied by our Supreme Court. So we all know that something's got to change. Inaction is not the answer. And so the message that I'd like to explore today is not about doing nothing per se, but rethinking how it is that we step in to all that must be done. So something's got to change. My growing suspicion is that it has less to do with what comes next or with what must come next, and more to do with how we get to the place where we can clearly see what may be of greatest service to humanity. Bayo Akomolafe, a Nigerian-born poet, philosopher, psychologist, and professor, he writes and speaks widely about what it means to be human in these times. I was really struck by these words of his recently that he draws from African wisdom. He writes, "The times are urgent. Let us slow down." The times are urgent. Let us slow down. So I'll admit this grates against every puritanical instinct in my genetic inheritance. So urgency means action. It means we're getting it done yesterday and we are doing it now. So it's a line of thinking that I'm really interested in interrogating. My own upbringing, my own inheritance, and many of our inheritances, that urgency means now. There's much talk in these times about progress and about moving forward. And as we all know, our lives, even as many of you who've left your work lives behind, our lives are incredibly full with requests for our time, our energy, and our resources. We're constantly pulled to do and to be and to purchase and to show up and to produce. Many of us spend much of each day in response mode to our phones, to our computers, to the crises of the world and our family members, to our own crises. We continue playing into systems of money and power and control that drives much of the world, even as we despise those systems. We know our nervous systems are worn out. We know that the pace of life has made many of us sick and sad and disconnected. And we long for more immersion and meaning in this life. We long to feel connected. Padre Gotuma, who some of you may know, hosts an On Being Run podcast on poetry, which I highly recommend. He considers silence to be having enough space in yourself to ask yourself strange questions. Many of us are so full of our own busyness that we have not made space for deep inquiry, for settling into our knowing, and for settling into our not knowing. Yes, slowing down is incredibly hard to do. And as I mentioned, I was raised in a type A, achievement-oriented home. My father was in the military. Filling time was really important. And we had schedules for the day from the morning that you wake up till the moment that you go to sleep. Efficiency and productivity and goal-orientedness. And I think there are some lessons in all of that. I'm not going to throw all of that away. And yet, as an adult, I've worked really hard to cultivate my own practice of meditation with no small degree of challenge, to be able to acknowledge that ever-existing list and sit still in this body with this heart and this mind and let it be. So much emerges, as you all know who have any kind of practice in your life that lets you have some quiet. So much emerges when we practice that. And we know from neuroscience, right, increasingly out in the world in layman's terms, that our habits of thinking and doing wear deep paths in our brains. So we default to those paths. I often think of the trails I love to hike in Pisgah and the ones that are really deeply eroded because so many folks have walked the same way for so many years. And our brains are like this, right? So we have to be willing to shift, to actually travel a new trail, like derail where we are and move over to a spot that perhaps we haven't been before, to find new ways of considering, responding to our reality. Octavia Rahim is a writer and a mind-body practitioner. She's got a beautiful book called Pause, Rest, Be, and it's had a powerful influence on my thinking recently. She writes that, quote, "Now is no ordinary moment in time. Now is a place of startling individual and collective endings. Now is the space before something else becomes. Now is both a promise and fulfillment of fresh beginnings." So she continues, quote, "The sacred cycle of being human seems to be speeding up. For many, we assume the remedy is to match that speed. As we become more and more exhausted, anxious, and disillusioned with trying to keep up with an inhumane pace, it's apparent that all of the battling, the swiftness, the forging ahead brought us collectively to this moment where we are perhaps finally ready to listen," she concludes, "for a new rhythm and tune." The kind of slowing down I'm exploring here with the inspiration of Rahim and Akomolafe and others moves beyond the personal and the ritual. This is surely important. It's the beginning place for everything in our human journey. But the kind of slowing down that I'm exploring here moves into the collective. It's beyond self-care and essential oils and soothing music, and even beyond meditation practices. Pausing, done in the spirit that I'd like to offer us to consider this morning, is not a technique that allows us to catch our breath, only to keep going exactly where we were headed before we stopped. It is not something accessible to only some. Slowing down is not a privilege, it is a human right. And it can serve to disrupt the powerful forces of capitalism, whiteness, and patriarchy that keep us pushing, doing, moving, achieving, being productive, and demanding the same destructive patterns from others. Demanding the same destructive patterns from others. Tricia Hershey is the founder of the NAP Ministry, which y'all may have heard of. Has anybody heard of the NAP Ministry before? If you haven't, you got to look her up. She's provocative and powerful, and she asserts that rest is resistance. So she does not mince words in her writing. She writes over the last decade about rest as social activism, like listening to our fatigue, to our tiredness, and honoring our humanity as a way to advocate for social justice. So she writes, quote, "This is about more than naps. It is about a deep unraveling from white supremacy and capitalism. These two systems are violent and evil. History tells us this, and our present living shows us this. Rest pushes back and disrupts a system that views bodies as a tool for production and labor. It is a counter-narrative. We know that we are not machines, we are divine." So Tricia Hershey's words are strong, and she's clear on what systems she sees as destructive. And I'd just like to posit here that the way we rest personally has actually bigger ripples, right? The way we look at our own ability to stop speaking, to stop doing, and to stop producing is maybe contributing to some larger scale change. Many of y'all have been on this planet far longer than I have. And you've seen, like our ancestors saw, much change and joy and despair. The pace of change in this moment does seem expedited, and maybe it's just because it is this moment that we're all living. We want to arrive in a new place, I think, a place of greater peace, of mutual respect, of clarity, and of equity. And it seems today sometimes farther and farther away, though I know many of you worked on the elections in November, and thank you, because in some ways it's closer. It's not here. It's not here yet. We are at a critical crossroads. I've been thinking about the various ways that we use the term pause. A pregnant pause, pausing to hold a thought, pausing to hesitate, to give someone or ourselves pause. My children love to watch international football, and in these soccer games, there's a technique called la pausa, where the player takes an almost imperceptible moment to look up and survey the landscape of the field and make a decision on the most artful pass to make next. And the newer players don't have la pausa down as a technique, but the more veteran players use this technique to be able to see what is happening around me, to make a good decision about what of many possibilities needs to happen next. The key here is that they don't just keep going. Years ago, I purchased a book that sat on my desk called The Way We're Working Isn't Working. At the time, I occupied a leadership role in a well-meaning organization, governed nonetheless by some of the toxic qualities that Tricia Hershey mentions. I never read the book, but I needed that title, I think, to sit in front of me day after day to acknowledge something here is broken, and I'm going to work my way toward a better understanding of what that is. Then, as maybe now, I stood on a bridge of sorts, having departed from something that I knew was ineffective and divisive and not feeling good, and not yet knowing how to land in the place where I envisioned what I knew was possible, how to land in a place where that could become real. I do believe we must take the opportunity to let go of the things we think we already know. Silence helps us with that. Stillness helps us with that. Now is our chance to reimagine completely. Perhaps, as with all things, we begin within. We notice our own heartbeats, our own breathing, our own fatigue, and we honor it. We stop speaking. We listen. Perhaps this habit begins to extend outside of us as individuals. We notice our habits of speech, of consuming, of defaulting to power within the organizations that we're a part of. We notice, and instead of plowing forward with business as usual, we stop. The pauses can be small, a breath as we transition from one thing to the next, looking up in gratitude at the sky as we move from a building to our car, an hour of non-doing set aside merely to be. And the pauses can be enormous, asking big questions of one another that might halt our assumptions about how our organizations function and why we've always done things this way. Octavia Rahim, again, writes about the fertility of these places of transition. She writes, quote, "The modes of travel that we have depended on are no longer reliable. Normalcy is suspended. Like caterpillars making their way toward their cocoon, we have crawled our way through endings, yet it is unclear what we are becoming." This liminal space is powerful, and I do think it requires a massive slowing down to embrace the fertility that can be present in that transition. We cannot race, achieve, or obliterate to-do lists on our way to deeper states of becoming. Justin Zorn and Lee Martz have written this joyfully inspiring book called Golden, The Power of Silence in a World of Noise. It's a really thick volume, and I spent most of winter break reading it, and it was amazing. They explore what has been lost when we fill our days with all the distraction that's available to us, all kinds of internal and external noise. They play with the idea of the machines that are part of our lives, our pinging devices, our constant quest to do something with an empty moment, of answering, of responding, of constantly being distracted. And they explore what finding stillness might look like for humans on an ever-moving planet. Each of us has to discern what this pausing looks like in our own bodies and in our own patterns of being, given our state in life, our responsibilities, our own wiring. How do we practice this and model this in our internal lives and the rituals of our days? I would offer that we'd be wise to share whatever it is that we're doing with others, to listen to others share how they are finding pause, to lift our eyes and to deeply reconsider what path we are walking and why, and who might be being harmed because of our default mode, our demands, our pushing forward, and our blazing ahead. Perhaps, as Pablo Neruda references, to really get things done, we need to do nothing at all, at least for a while. Perhaps, to offer the most helpful thing, we need to use no words. Omid Safi is a columnist for On Being, and he wrote a widely read piece years ago on the disease of being busy. He bemoans the way that we push our children to have full schedules. As a mother, this bites and I'm aware of it. Quote, "Horribly destructive habits start really, really early," he writes. He reflects on his own grieving connection with others and writes, "When I ask, 'How are you?' I am not asking how many items are on your to-do list. I'm not asking how many items are in your inbox. I want to know how your heart is doing at this very moment. How is your heart in this very moment?" These are urgent times. Do we feel as a global community, as a country, as a city, as a circle of Unitarian Universalists that we're heading down a path we can sustain? Do we feel that we might need a significant and authentic pause to look up and notice what is happening around us and within us, to discern what must happen next? To perhaps listen in silence so deeply that we choose to rethink the entire paradigm we've been living under for so long and redefine individually and collectively how we want to be. Some of you may have read Pico Iyer, whose travel writing and poetry have circulated widely for many decades. He writes, quote, "In an age of speed, nothing could be more invigorating than going slow. In an age of distraction, nothing could feel more luxurious than paying attention. And in an age of constant movement, nothing is more urgent than sitting still." These were a lot of words today, and I appreciate you hearing them from me. I hope some little spark in your heart carries into this new year, some little piece of inspiration for finding the brand of stillness, of pause, of quiet that will serve you. I'm wishing all of you, all of us, the curiosity to explore the pauses, the stillness, the silences large and small in this life. I'm wishing all of you, all of us, the courage to sit with the uncertainty, the absence of words, the non-doing, the gigantic and the microscopic questions. Change is everywhere. May it be for good, and may we together build a world that honors all that is. Thank you very much.
Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn, "Filled with Loving Kindness." The words will be on the screen.
Our closing words come from Octavia Rahim's book, Pause, Rest, Be. No matter where you find yourself, I pray you have the courage to pause sometimes, to rest and look within, to be still and know that you are not lost. You are making your way home.
Sanctuary, oh, she turned it off.